Hello, hello. I'm here down, not down, but inside my blankie fort. I made a fort with blankets to record some audio stuff. And I'm using it to record this new episode of my, talk show? Allegedly, the only talk show where somebody takes an idea previously stated in Spanish and turns it, or like translated. I don't know what I do anymore. But yeah, this is another episode of the Conversations with me, Carlz, where I take like media that I like and I talk about it. First in Spanish and now in English, because I don't know why, to be honest. But this one is a doozy because this is a movie or a movie series that I've loved like since forever, and it's. Classic is like such a loaded word sometimes, but it's true. Perhaps one of the most classic sci-fi movies and stories ever told. Of course, I'm talking about Blade Runner. In this case, in particular, I'm gonna jump in between Blade Runner, the sequel, not the one that never came out, but 2049, directed by Denis Villeneuve, and the book itself, right? Do sheep dream? No. Do android? No. Do sheep? Well, you know the book, which is the first one is based. So the origin of this sort of reflection of conversation actually had a genesis in one of the thoughts that I often have when I watch science fiction and or fantasy at until certain point, right? So the deal is that whenever I watch science fiction, I'm always looking for what I like to call like the X factor. I know, a cheesy, crappy, generic name, but whatever. Bear with me. The X factor in a sci-fi narrative, it's always this sort of like either a point or argument or a fact in which something turns from the science part to the fiction, right? I have a couple of examples that I always like to use. The first one is Star Trek, right? So Star Trek is a really grounded type of narrative and series and franchise. That's the whole idea, right? It's pretty grounded. It's like, oh, what if humans would go into space and have like this contact with alien cultures and everything? That's one of the things that is Star Trek, and one of the things that I like about Star Trek is that grounded area, or like the way of portraying these things as if it could happen to us, right? But you wonder what sort of makes Star Trek be sci-fi and not just be some sort of realistic part, right? And it's that element of them actually going into space, and you can clearly see what I call the X factor, which is this element that has no like scientific explanation until some point where like you sort of break the boundaries of reality. In the case of Star Trek, is the fact that they are capable of traveling faster than the speed of light, right? Which by our standards or our knowledge is impossible, right? Relativity and like time dilation and all that nerd shit. Um, we know that like nobody can travel faster than the speed of light, because after that, time and matter and speed itself, they become wonky, right? So in Star Trek, they created this concept of the warp bubble, right? It's like, oh, how come starships in Star Trek can go faster than the speed of light? Oh, well, they have these chambers, which if you put this sort of fuel inside of them, they can create a warp bubble which protects them from relativity, so they can travel faster than the light, which they call warp speed, right? The warp speed and warp bubble, whatever. So, what is the funny thing here? It's like you can clearly tell that they are skipping a step, right? Using this X factor. Like Star Trek could never probably, in the future, who knows? But right now, they can't explain to you how the warp bubble works. It's all like a fantasy in a way, right? But they jump that hoop, right? So they become from just something scientific to something sci-fi-ish, right? And then you can go into like the replicators and first contact, but it also goes into this factor that breaks reality and turns it into fiction, right? The other example that I always like to use for all of you anime fans out there is from Gundam, right? By now we know that in theory it's possible to have like what they call mobile suits, right? Basically robots, like automatons, which can like walk and they can like do a bunch of shit. But there is a difficulty there, and the difficulty is we don't have an energy source or a metal which is like light enough and like flexible enough and resistant enough to make these things. So you can make like a really light one that would instantly break, or you can have like a really heavy one that you can't power. So what is the X factor there? So you have a metal which is the Gundamium, I think it's called, but you have the metal which is fictional, right? And you have power sources which vary depending on the Gundam series. So it's the same exercise, right? You have something uh, fictional breaking this, or like pushing this scientific part into the fictional space. Well, the point with this X factor as a way of understanding sci-fi is that it's something that I always carry with me, because I'm not obsessed, but I'm always looking for this X factor, because this X factor is not only something that would allow to, let's say, make something fantastic into something real. It's not like a series or like a movie or like a novel is going to explain to us how to travel faster than the speed of light. And so I'm not looking for that. I'm not looking for an answer, but I'm looking for the exercise that goes within. So sometimes it's just that, a tool, like in Star Trek. Like uh, I don't recall many storylines, if any whatsoever, in which like the star of the story would be explaining warp bubbles themselves. See my point? Like it's rarely a topic. They just do. They just do. At worst, in worst case scenarios, they go like the first contact rules, right? Like where you can't have any sort of interaction with a culture that has not achieved warp travel, and that sort of things. But let's quickly turn into back to Blade Runner. So the other day I was like looking at, I don't remember what I was looking at, like something about best sci-fi stories, and I'm like, oh, I haven't watched Blade Runner in a long time. So I went there and I watched Blade Runner, the first movie, once again, right? And of course, this idea of the X Factor came back to my mind, and I was like, okay, like I know what the movie is mostly about, right? We know it's a detective looking for some like rebellious. I mean, what are the replicants? Are they robots, androids, humanoids, whatever? But they are artificial beings, right? And immediately as the movie begins, it begins with like this contextualizing sort of like caption that quickly explains the situation with the replicants and how they came to be, and then they didn't need them anymore, so they killed them, and immediately you get triggered, right? Taking into consideration this whole X factor element, right? What immediately happens is that you realize that they won't be talking about this X factor, which at first glance is the creation of the replicants themselves, right? That is a commonly used narrative, like brand topic, like it's a common narrative in sci-fi, right? The creation of artificial intelligence, which is like a current thing nowadays for us. But it's one that is recurrent, and it always fails in my book to fulfill this alleged X factor in a satisfactory way. What I mean by this is that all of these narratives where like artificial intelligence or beings are created, they rarely do proper introduction to the fact of how they created. That is the hardest part of creating an artificial being, right? Like how do I make it a being? What does it mean for it to be a being? Like, and if you want to get poetic, like, does it have a soul, or like, does it have personhood, right? How do we acknowledge that? Well, none of that is a subject for Blade Runner. None of it is, right? So the card, which is played by Harrison Ford, like the protagonist, is just hunting these machines, and they go about like the whole focus of the movie is about the case, the detective like case. He's looking for clues, right? Like everything is really dark, and because I guess society sucks in the future as much as it sucks in the present, and is looking for them, like, but they never really go into that, of course, until the point which is probably the key point of the movie, which is the car meeting Rachel, right? This replicant who allegedly doesn't know that she's a replicant. And here they throw like a bone which sort of make me realize like the big scope of Blade Runner among these three works, right? So the whole point of finding out whether a replicant is a replicant or not is based on this test, and this test is supposed to measure the being in front of the other side capabilities for empathy, right? This is an like sort of like a key term which sort of haunted my latest experience with Blade Runner. So they look for empathy, and even though they don't explain how replicants exactly came to be, there's a logic in it. There's a logic in like trying to say what is or what would an artificial being not feel, or like not have access to empathy. When I saw that, I remembered the book, right? Um, if we think about the core of the book, which is also about the card and the case of looking for these rogue replicants, right? So the book begins and ends, spoilers obviously, with the card trying to get an animal, a real animal, right? And as they do in the movie, it's not really a question of what makes a true animal. It just is like, okay, this is a real one and this is a fake one. So what does it really mean for the fact that we don't care what makes a real animal real? Is the fact that that's not the point, right? The point is what we do with these things, how we react to them. And that sort of a train of thought sort of like gave me a big refresh of how to understand, not really understand, of how to enjoy this movie and this series in particular, right? Blade Runner, the first one, sort of like goes really hard into like the visuals and like the violence, like even to the point of, in my opinion, a little bit of ruining one of its elements, right? Which is the Carlz relationship with Rachel, because in the movie he basically, and pardon my French, he forces himself into her, like almost. It's almost like a rape, like, and it's no small thing, right? And in the book, it's a little bit dicey too. In the book, I always got the impression that Rachel was sort of like a kid, making the car a little bit of like a, like underage, interested sort of type of detective, which is always a fucked up thing to think, right? But the point is that Rachel's lack of feelings, or like that dicey relationship they have in the movie, and the interest based on this like sort of like a kid like innocence, they are both sort of mechanisms for you to create this element of empathy in between, right? All that changes is how it's portrayed and how complicated they want to make it. So in the book, it's a little bit more complicated than in the series. I mean, in the movie, right? In the movie, it's a bit straightforward and kind of basic. And it's like, okay, I love you. Okay, I love you too. Okay, I'm gonna force myself in you. And like, okay, now they're in love, I guess. But the movie, the first one, takes you in this trip that you end up sort of forgetting this element of empathy as a determinant of not personhood, but like not humanity either, but like this element of individuality, which would make uh, an individual worth being not treated like crap, right? Or how do they call them? Like the Blade Runner, they dispose them, like something like that, right? But if you think about it, you get lost into it, and like Blade Runner, despite being like as good as it is, in this my latest viewing of it, I could I got a little bit distracted and even like, a bit bored by the third act, right? Because it has a lot of focus on these replicants being like kind of revolutionaries and sort of implying that they are like special, right? That part is sort of like strange. But then you get the famous ending, right? The tears in the rain. And it's so strange because the climax of the movie is like a fight, like a really it's not violent, but it's really energetic, and like the car goes through like this so many dangers, and in the end the blonde replicant, I forget his name, sorry, sort of like forgives him, or not forgives him, but like lets him go, right? And he knows he's dead, right? Basically, he knows, and he chooses as his parting words to talk about like sort of like a meaningless point of existence. So everything passes by like tears in the rain, so it's irrelevant. But there is like so many funky layers to the classic Tears in the Rain. Like I don't want to pretend that I'm like this big how can you say, like that I have like a revolutionary view on this. Like you can probably find like a million I don't know, papers, video studies and everything. To me it was just okay, this franchise is about empathy, and what is most like empathic ever if it's not the misery of being, right? I know how it sounds. It sounds a little bit emo, but like I'm okay with that. But like, what sounds more empathic? Is empathic or empathetic? Empathetic. Well, empathy creating, right? What is more like empathic than that? Like realizing that your existence is like pointless. So he chooses to make a point instead of like killing him, which sort of like ties the whole movie in a bow. And that immediately made me think about how the book closes itself, right? As I said, it begins and it ends with the whole animal thing. And then you realize that even though they look different, it's the same. So the book finishes, if I remember correctly, with I think it's the Carl's wife. Like they get this animal. I don't remember which type of animal it is, but they get this animal which they don't know whether it's real or not. But they go like, okay, we're gonna take care of it anyways. In a sense, like saying like, do electric sheep dream? No, dreams, whatever. Do artificial animals dream? Fuck it, we don't care. So empathy and connection can happen whether you are artificial or not, and that leads us to Blade Runner 2049, right? So if you've watched the first one, even read the book, you can still struggle with all these things that I'm saying. That of course they are my interpretation. You can still struggle with them, like I agree on them or not, whatever you want. But with 2049, now you have a director, which I love, which he's great. Who doesn't love Denis, or who doesn't love to say Denis Villeneuve? We have a director which, even though he's really artistic and like he doesn't fuck around. I think all of his movies are really deeply emotional, and well, he seems like a really emotional person, which is one of the reasons why I like him, right? But even though his movies are artistic and they have like plenty more to say besides how they look or how they are portrayed or how he's a director, like all of his movies, I feel like they go straight to the point in the emotion and metaphor department. Like for example, if you think of Arrival, right? Arrival was another movie which I love. Like there's no, even though you can make interpretations over what is shown, like he doesn't fuck around. It's about connection, right? It's again, it's about empathy. It's about creating links with other beings, right? Through the emotions themselves, the emotions of existing, right? He doesn't fuck around, and 2049 is like that. 2049 begins and ends in a poetic manner too, just like the book, with like little like tips or like hints towards empathy. Uh, I don't think I don't think I need to retell the whole of Blade Runner 2049, right? But basically, the protagonist Joe, he gets into another case looking for like rogue replicants, and then they find out that there's actually a replicant human hybrid, which for a second they think it's him, but spoiler, turns out it's not him, but it's Descartes and Rachel's daughter. So there's a bunch of things on 2049 which also sort of like exploit is not the term, but there's a bunch of things in that movie that sort of try to add things to this empathy argument that I've watched these products of these works under now. So they put on things like, I don't know, like the Robot Rebellion, or like the big bad company, uh, like being a big bad company trying to make the perfect artificial being so they can sell them and whatnot, or like Descartes' own self. What do you call that when you get like a you isolate yourself, right? Self isolation, yeah, perhaps. And the whole point is that once I got this idea from the movie and understanding the book again, like everything in 2049 just points towards like the big red X in the middle of the map, right? Everything goes that way. Everything. And you can even start seeing like metaphors that somehow they are straight out of the book, for example. So Joe's relationship with his AI sort of partner, it's the same as the book, right? Like, do we care that the animals have identity or not? It's the same question we make when we wonder, does Joe AI has personhood at all? It's sort of the exact same thing happening, right? And if you think about it, the idea is great because all it does is make something obvious more relative, right? And I'm talking about the fact that this X factor of the message of empathy between individuals, you can challenge it in several ways. So you challenge it. You say like, okay, like Joe is a replicant. Does he has the capacity? And the movie does play with that. They make him like take his, how do they call it? Like a leveling test, grounding test. They make it about it, right? they make a point out of him at some point not feeling empathy, and at some point sort of creating it and being punished for it. If you see the reflection on that, you see how the replicant test itself, it's filled with questions and situations which would create empathy in any being, distress and empathy. And then it gets punished on artificial beings, but something that will be probably rewarded in non-artificial things. So you see, the point is that every element of the movie is challenging this fact. And well, fact is a little bit strong, but it's challenging, and that's how it gets so good, because it keeps refreshing and challenging the ideas. So if we stay with Joe and what's the name of the AI? I don't remember. So you have the whole story arc of them, right? And at any point, you can go like, oh, he's just carrying this weird like AI artifact, and like, it's fake. So eventually, spoiler, and during the third act of the movie, she gets murdered by I even say murder, right? She gets destroyed by one of Jared Leto's company goons, who is also like a lady replicant that has her own story arc, right? But she gets destroyed, and it's so impactful because like and it's brilliantly shot, right? They created a mobile projector for her, so he can carry her around. And like the bad lady goes like, "Oh, thank you for enjoying our products." And just before she destroyed it, the AI says to Joe, "I love you," right? And this is some poetic shit, like it pulls on all your strings, because if you have been watching the movie, like feeding this idea, right, that it's not relevant whether she's real or not, you get some core raw emotion which in some way goes beyond the question whether she's real or not. So as she's being destroyed, she says, "I love you," and then the lady says something like, "Oh, I'll give you another one," or something, right? And Joe himself, he gets to experience another encounter with this product, which is a lady that is programmed to care for him, right? And he's deeply distraught and emotional at that point. At that point in the movie, her his AI companion is being destroyed, and like he's not really sure whether he is or not the son of the car, whether he is or not this replicant hybrid, right? He doesn't know, so he doesn't know who he is. Like, he's being challenged by these feelings that ultimately he's feeling, right? And Villeneuve does this amazing, one of the most legendary shots of 2049, where he's faced with like a giant hologram of the program that used to be his partner, right? And like he's in awe on this giant reflection. And how does that not feel like any of us real people when we are overwhelmed by emotion? That's exactly how it feels. That's exactly how it feels. And by Villeneuve, that is great. And it's all about empathy again. Like, it seems like the the franchise itself, its alleged X factor, is not so much as an argument, but it's sort of like an element of the experience itself, which makes it like a not really like how like you could nerd out about like many things, about details, about numbers, about all stuff like that. And probably many people do it with Blade Runner as a franchise. But me, I just keep getting like drawn into this idea. and also how well played is by Ryan Gosling, right? You can say whatever you want about Ryan Gosling, but he has this look. He has this look where you can see like he's going through stuff. We can say like that. You can clearly see that he's going through stuff, which is funny, but it's perfect. And at the end of the day, it seems like the whole process of building Blade Runner's X Factor, as I've been trying to do, it has to do with this key element of not explaining how replicants came to be. Like it has to be with this intentional negligence, right? And every sort of like a clue that the movie gives you, it's not so much as a clue, but it is as a distraction. Whether it's either a distraction or an element that would add more to the experience of seeing the reflection of empathy in individual characters, right? The other important part to mention here is the Carl and Rachel's daughter herself, right? Which they had like incarcerated, and she creates fake memories for replicants because, and this is another cute element of the franchise, apparently if you give memories to artificial beings, it's easier for them to believe they're real. And when they go to see her, they do this brilliant thing also, Villeneuve and company. So Joe is trying to figure out whether one of his memories is real, right? So she finds this girl, which is like a programmer or like a product. They don't know exactly who she is. And apparently, this hybrid has the uncanny capacity from a bubble to create realistic memories. So, as Joe hands her these images that he wants to know whether they're real or not, she's watching it and she realizes that it's sort of like a version of her own memories. And she begins to cry, right? And she says something of the sort of like these are real memories, which sort of like confused Joe at the beginning because those are real memories, but they are not his. And what is the play here? What is the play here? Is that in the end, even if they're not his, right? It's not that he's just feeling them, but the process of him having those memories is, again, to have the empathy that is implied in these memories. So the strongest memories, right, the ones that affect you the most, it doesn't matter whether they're real or not. It doesn't really matter whether like A and B and the in between is a logical process. But what matters is that it sounds. I don't like using this sort of terminology because it's too subjective and whatnot. It's not really something you can explain. But ironically, it's something that you can totally explain. What is important about this memory is the empathy they create. And that it's a brilliant thing to do because the ones that are creating fake memories to give to you are the filmmakers. It's the movie itself, right? And that led me to think like every time I've cried with a film and everything, right? How real is that? Like we're not talking about what makes an emotion or like we're not defining emotion in a really cheesy way. We're just feeling emotions. And that's why I think 2049, and I'm gonna say, like give, I don't know, you can call it the hot take of the episode. I think it's a better work out of them all, right? Because no matter how many elements or how many factors are like involved in the process of the movie's argument, it never loses its side, the side of this objective, the side of this, how can you say, the side of this message that you wanna say, right? That you wanna tell. And I guess the whole learning, not process, but the whole um, conclusion, or the whole thing that I learned about this latest experience with the Blade Runner franchise is that sometimes sci-fi is a little bit like metal music, you know. When well, to this day, I'm quite a metalhead myself, but I had this friend during high school who used to say that metalheads are the cheesiest music enjoyers ever. Like, we are all but raw emotion and whatnot. And I think sci-fi is sort of like the same at the end. That could also be a hot take. I mean, taking aside the infinite amount of discussions that often happens in Star Trek and Star Wars and like Dune, and you have like these convoluted storylines and universes, like this is the boss of that, and like this energy or power goes from this to that, and like this hierarchy of things, or like these gods and everything. And like, dude, in, in the end, the things that stay with you, right, are these really emotional stuff. And I don't think it's fair to finish with Star Trek, but like, might as well aim that way. All of the best Star Trek, and I'm talking about the Next Generation here, all of the best Star Trek The Next Generation episodes are but emotional reflections from science fiction towards like universal states of humankind. By now, I'm just gonna talk about humans, right? I'm not in any condition to uh, grant personhood or independence to any other conscious being in here or out there. But like Measure of a Man, Darmok. What else? What is that episode where Picard lives a whole life in like a second or something? It's all about feelings and emotions. Perhaps that just means that us nerds, we're just emotion seekers, man. Like, often people goes like, oh, this is like telenovela shit, or like this is like all like corny dramas and everything. No, I like this science fiction or this high fantasy, like with a lot of lore and like whatever, like we don't know this, like we are trying to make fiction out of that. But like, my latest viewing of Blade Runner just like made me think of the opposite, like the complete opposite. So we're just gonna talk about elements of genre that sort of like not hide, but they end up in the same thing, right? Like you get like I don't know, like traditional dramas, and then I don't know, and you like face it, like put it face to face against like science fiction or like high fantasy, and then you get this communion in between, which is human emotion. And like, I think some people might be reluctant to that, or maybe some people are gonna get into the argument of like saying which one of these elements or which one of these works either represent better like human emotion, or like they're more authentic. You get into these bullshit scenarios where like people just get crazy arguing for something that ultimately it's irrelevant. In the end, I guess the point here is that the X factor in science fiction, sometimes it matters, sometimes it's not like it doesn't matter, but sometimes it matters more than you could think about. Well, I think my big conclusion is that when the rest of the either fictional world or like fictional story is not strong enough, in that case you want this X factor to be more poignant, to be more edgy, to be more strong, to be more like a determinant in the story. You want it to be. You want it to be because the story itself is not giving you too much. But in the case of Blade Runner, you sort of realize that this X factor is not as important because the whole setting, right? Everything in it, the characters, the images, the script, everything points to this X factor. Everything works for it, and it works as a whole to make you feel this X factor rather than understanding it, which is one of the reasons why I don't really like the movie Ex Machina that much. Oh, I'm going into a tangent, which I will not thread right now because I haven't seen Ex Machina in a long time. But I remember being highly frustrated exactly for that point. Like not believing or not seeing the movie sort of like representing this X factor. Like I thought the movie was all over the place and sort of like ignored some of the questions for the sake of either shock value or other things. But then you can see the exercise being played among different types of works, right? Like you can see it play out. Just ask the questions and like see how the work itself answer it, and getting these answers is so fun. It's so fun and so stimulating and ultimately addictive, and that's why we keep coming back to these things, right? But anyways, let's make a conclusion about Blade Runner, right? I think Blade Runner is one of the best sci-fi franchise of all time because they managed to make, as I said, every element on it work for a single straight goal. And it was a work of brilliance to get Denis Villeneuve to do 2049 because that's exactly what he does. Like almost nobody that I know. Like I'm gonna give you 2.5 hours of content, which all points out to the same direction, which is straight to the heart. That's cheesy IF, and I think it's worth it. Is this my own sci-fi version of cheesiness in my own corner of the internet where I sort of like discharge my emotional distress? I don't know. But Blade Runner, man, what an experience, what a franchise. I think I've seen enough of it for now. I'm not touching like the weird book sequel or like any animation stuff for now. I think with the book, the first movie and the second movie, I have more than enough. I don't know if that's good, but it is what it is. So, thank you once again for listening to me. Anyone who ends up listening to my voice, which is kind of raspy right now. I don't usually sound. I guess I sound good when I'm sort of like a little bit raspy, just because I've been talking all day. But that's it. I will see you guys next time with more cheesy raw emotion from a random guy who is bald. Take good care of yourselves, and till the next time.